Well, to bring the mood up, we're going to bring in our good friend and comrade Cale Brooks to talk about his most recent piece in Jacobin magazine. For folks who aren't familiar with Cale, Cale is my editor at Jacobin when we do videos for Jacobin's YouTube channel. He's also coming in disguise as Bhaskar Sankara.
This is the face of white socialism right here. Let me just, it's my name. There we go.
No, we're really happy to have Cale. Again, if people aren't familiar, you should definitely check out Cale's work. He is the producer and editor of all the great shows and content that they put up on the Jacobin YouTube channel, and also the writer of a great new piece in Jacobin magazine called From Posting to Politics. How's it going, Cale?
Doing well. I'm doing pretty well. I was listening to the beginning of the show. I feel like I'm just now going to come in and hype up everything you just said, David. I don't know what else I can add after that.
Dave's got a tight 4 minutes on left pessimism. That really
I do, because I just the thing is though is sometimes people ask me for personal advice with being happy. Is I can't help you out there, but I could tell you that if you take the long view of these things, that you can put these things in a little bit more perspective.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is, just a sense of where, situate yourself as a leftist at any other decade in history, and not great situation there either. So, I think that perspective is really important to recognize what sort of possibilities there are now, even as, they're all being crushed right before our eyes.
Well, but anyways, let's get to this piece and this argument, because I actually think it's pretty good. Cale, I don't know if you have this prepped, Matt, but
got it up here.
Everyone has different feelings about online, but there are some strategies that work and some strategies that don't. And I know that this is something that's very much in Cale's wheelhouse. He's very passionate against social media, but you do appreciate good posts and their ability to change hearts and minds, right?
It's visceral. How can you not appreciate a good post?
Like this one.
I'll can you
I'm looking over your shoulder.
Yeah, so I need to give me 1 second, and I'll be able to show it to both of you, because I need to do a two-step process here. Everyone else will see it before you guys, and then I'll share it with you. Here it is. Come on.
I can just read it.
All right. Oh, here it is. Finally, there. Dave, if you want to read it for the YouTube or the Twitter.
Dawn 2021. Hello, POTUS. Please embrace Marxist-Leninism and Mao Zedong thought.
I mean, you got to shoot your shot, right?
You got to shoot
exactly.
your shot.
It's in his mentions now.
But obviously, I mean, that's one is a joke post. But when you're talking about the potential that we have using online, organizing, and the kind of historical moment that we're at, you're talking about something very differently than just hoping tweeting slogans out at elected officials is going to change their hearts and minds about politics, right, Cale?
Yeah, no. I think that's probably the most low-hanging fruit, of course. That it's kind of the fantasy of some people. It's kind of this funny. Some of it is somewhat real, of course, that you can just tweet at celebrities, at politicians, and there is a chance that they will see that. But obviously, that's not. I don't think anyone serious really believes that someone seeing a tweet that says, "Hey, can you please do this thing," is going to do that much as far as changing a political trajectory or changing a program or something. A lot of what I'm referring to is, this is an essay basically for the left. This is by and for the left. And so it's trying to understand our moment that we're in, where, of course, a lot of the left, which the American left today is pretty middle class, a lot of us have been indoors during COVID. Obviously, there's exceptions to that people have been out in the streets throughout the year for various protests, obviously a lot this past summer. And people are knocking on doors. There's a fairly robust tax the rich campaign here in New York City with the local DSA chapter. That's happening, and that's important. But again, I think that's kind of those are the exceptions. A lot of what's going on right now, of course, has to be online. And one of the things that I do is in the article, and what I've said before, is basically that two things. One, we should understand online mediums, online tools as basically instrumental, that these are things that we can use, but that, and sometimes it is very useful. I mean, I cite like the West Virginia teacher strike, that it was important that they could link up all these different schools across the state using Facebook groups. That's, of course, useful in that particular circumstance. And there's going to be others that are like that. But I think the medium itself and these mediums, the technology itself is not capable of doing the basics of left and socialist political organizing, which is that you have to actually reach out and meet other people who disagree with you. And you have to make the case for them that in the face of all the different options in front of them, they have a particular material and political circumstance that they're living within. And they have different choices in front of them, some that are more individualistic, of I'm going to hold my head down. I'm just going to, try to advance in my particular job. I'm not going to upset the boss, or it might be hearing from some, right-wing guru or something about, well, actually the path to salvation is by cleaning your room and, fixing your house first and all those things. Or, more collective options that say, we actually have so much more to gain by you and me and others linking up and fighting for our collective material interests. Now, the problem with that, of course, the reason why people don't automatically do that, why workers don't automatically do that, is because capitalism front loads all of the risk and all of the challenges that go into that effort up front. Because if you are thinking of organizing, you might immediately face the wrath of your employer, which, again, in capitalism, we are dependent on our employers because they own all the stuff that provides our sustenance, our food, our clothing, our housing, that we are renting, we're buying, we end up having to sell our labor to them to get all these other things. So you're basically, by going the collective route, immediately saying, I'm going to war with the person that provides all the things that keeps me alive, right? And it's political organizers that make the case that you have so much more to gain by us collectively organizing together. And I just don't think that social media has that capacity, and not just social media, but just the online world, the online tools, the various kinds of websites, the various organizing tools. I mean, again, it's means to ends in the same way that, political education, this is kind of my main example throughout this, political education ultimately at its best has to be a means to a greater ends, and people should be using it for those ends, for organizing. But in and of itself, it has limitations. And so it's, in some sense, I kind of understood this as a fairly evergreen argument of like, we're stuck inside for the time being, but as, people are getting vaccinated, as we can get outside, we have to be talking to people who don't already agree with us. Yeah, I have more, obviously, but
yeah, no, it seems like it does seem like a common sense sort of view that seems to get obscured by like consultants, basically, right? Like Adolph Reed talks about this. I heard him on This Is Revolution talk about the importance of in-person meetups. In this documentary, Reclaim Idaho, it's all about going across the state to literally let people see you in real life.
And just to add to, keep going, Matt, but like, like in union campaigns too, like having those kind of in-person showings of of solidarity and support mean a lot. Posting and seeing videos is great, but seeing people in your community, wandering around and supporting you means a lot more to you than just a kind of idea that there's people out there watching.
Yeah, and you think about like the videos for like Biden or even the NFL players, which were great, but like imagine if any of those guys went and showed up in Bessemer or something like that.
Right. Well, and solidarity requires real relationships with one another. Right. And this is something that Jay McAlevey, in her postmortem of the Bessemer Amazon Union Drive, she puts this very plainly that, effectively a lot of what ended, well, in total, not assigning agency, but just in total, most of the effort around that campaign ended up being a lot of the media attention. There's a lot of social media posts. Obviously, groups like DSA, like important left groups in the US were behind this, left political figures were behind this. And that's all really useful. And like, we don't discount that at all. It's important to have those. And I think you would like to be successful, you're going to need that. But at the end of the day, because these workers in this workshop, in this, at this, you know, at the warehouse, they ultimately said, not like, oh, I don't deserve a raise. They didn't say, you know, I don't deserve greater job security. They said, I'm not going to challenge my employer because there's going to be far greater repercussions against me. And online, social media, regular media, like these are not enough to reassure people that they actually have a chance at this fight.
And I would just, you know, this is something that you and I have talked about, you know, privately many times. It's one of those things, especially if you're like organizing, like in the South, for example. All these people think like, oh, all of these voters, these working class people, they're like, oh, they don't want Medicare for all. They don't want this or that or that. It's like, no, a lot of people just like don't think that it's possible. And I think that the way that and what that means is that like your tactics for winning support and organizing around that are very different than just saying like, oh, we have to convince people that these are like the best policies. A lot of what we're trying to do is like, we can do this. It's possible. You're not going to get fired for joining a union. You know, you're not going to see repercussions because a lot of people are worried when they see any kind of change happen in their environment, be it political or in the workplace, and taught by their real experience, that's probably going to be a bad thing, given, you know, decades and decades of like neoliberalism, right? Any big change is probably not going to be to your benefit, right? So the difference between, you know, what online organizing and engagement is so much about like having dialogue and discourse and changing minds potentially, versus like building community and having organizations and face-to-face, you know, community. I mean, function is sort of the word that I'm searching for here. Really does have so much more effect than just showing, you know, a strong presence online.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and that's not to say that, like, obviously I'm the video editor at Jacobin. Like that it's my job to produce videos, but I mean, I like kind of pushed Bhaskar into creating this because I do think there's a great deal of use for the left and for the world, inevitably, to have left political education in video format. And so again, this is something I go into. I mean, there's kind of a dual function of what we do. I mean, all three of us, that I think on the one hand, there's that media that is meant for, you know, someone who doesn't already agree with us. And it's meant to introduce people to our political perspective, that being a socialist means that you have a socialist worldview, that you understand the relations between people, between things, between the employer and the employees, and understand that capitalism is an actual, real, abstract, but real phenomenon in the world. And we make the case that you can understand the world like clearly through this lens, and it actually will have greater explanatory power over what actually happens in people's lives. But we then also frame it, we kind of frame a political question in order to then say, well, this is the problem, and these are the particular solutions that are available, and this is what we're, you know, this is the diagnosis, this is the prognosis, and this is how we're advocating that we move forward. And that's important, right?
Oh no, I mean, I would just, you know, add and keep going there. Like, I remember very vividly, like Fernando Haddad, when he came to New York after losing to Bolsonaro, he was in a conversation with Yanis Varoufakis. And, you know, and this is not like a dig at Haddad, but he went in and did the kind of classic, you know, argument that we were seeing from a lot of losses that the left had, and, you know, also like the kind of more center left too, to like these like right figures during this period of time. What is that? It's like, it's fake news and technology are beating us, and so we can't beat technology. And Giannis was just like, No, like if these are tools that are being used by our opponents and they're beating us on that battlefield, we can't use that as an excuse. These are tools, these are, things, and you're giving them like a kind of essence instead of recognizing that these are tools that our opponents are just using at a much better than we're using them currently.
Right. I mean, Matt, looks like you want to say
Well,
something.
I was just going to say, yeah, it is like these are probably the largest propaganda machines in the history of the world, right? Like, and of course you can't just leave them. And like, I reflect a lot on the part, Cale, where you're talking about only 85% of people follow this stuff very closely. And I think that's really important to remember. Like when...
Or no, the opposite. Only 15%.
Right, exactly. Only 15% follow it very closely and 85% are very casual. And that, to me, it's never been a surprise that people could have voted for Donald Trump. People could have voted for Trump because, like, chances are they probably saw him more on The Apprentice than they did on the campaign trail. And so I think that's always important to keep in mind. And, as just to speak in my part of the spectacle, like majority report is more spectacle focused. And like I think the way you talk about political education is important because to the extent that there are people there, and if that is any kind of entry point, like if people, I'm going to be political now, so I'm going to watch Trevor Noah and The Daily Show, right? I know that there's some truth to my journey in that. To the extent that I think there's use in engaging in that, it is just to catch those eyeballs on these massive, machines and then direct them to a better understanding of the world, basically.
Right. And ultimately, I mean, did I freeze?
You did freeze.
No, yeah.
There you are. Now you're good.
Okay.
Yep.
Sorry. That's just censorship. Yeah, I mean, but, and ultimately you want people to be engaged with a left political project and the more that they're engaged, the better. So clicking on a video, clicking on a post is extremely limited. It's a very, YouTube is just like a big buffet of all these different interesting, and there's cat videos, there's us, there's Peterson, there's some stuff on science, whatever, you'll just click through and you find things that you find interesting and you move on. That's where I think, honestly, people make sometimes a little bit too much about the right-wing presence on YouTube, because most of these people are not proposing a political platform. They're just speaking to really alienated people with reactionary, bad, awful ideas. But at the end of the day, it's something that is reflecting a reality in people's lives, that they are in fact alienated. They do feel like they're getting the short end of the stick, and then they're giving them the worst, most distorted and unpleasant answer to that. But it's always going to be an easy one of like, oh, you feel bad? Well, fuck them. Fuck that person.
Yeah.
So that's where, again, a lot of what we do on the left and with our political education, of course, we have to have a greater sense of rigor and accuracy, because the system is rigged against us effectively, that it favors, blocks of capital, accumulating greater and greater capital, that corporations are going to make profits, and media that says, yeah, you're just an individual in the world, and you should just be the best you can be, and it's the Muslims' fault if XYZ happens. That is just completely compatible with the current economic and political systems, whereas everything that we're doing is challenging how the actual systems function, because we understand, but we believe normatively, but we also understand that it systematically creates injustices. And so we have to then create both an analysis of how it actually works, not just the appearance of the system, but the actual essence of what's going on underneath it, and then offer counter solutions. And we have a variety of solutions. Some of them are better than others. And I think that's where the second function of political education comes in, which is that we have to actually have, in absence of greater left political institutions, we need things like our YouTube channels to actually foster a healthy political culture, intellectual culture, that there's some sticky stuff that we got to talk through. And to the best of our abilities as individuals on the left and online,
Mm-hmm.
we have to not be afraid to address these things and try to work through like, okay, what really is like the most accurate analysis of what's going on right now? And how do we as a left progress so that we can actually be in that better world that we keep talking about?
Yeah, and I think one of the difficult aspects that I'm sure you've considered too is that the tools we're using weren't designed by us, right?
Right.
And like YouTube and social media in
They're
general.
designed to rate chicks.
I mean, YouTube very much, and Kale sent us a piece about kind of X like alt-right guy who was making YouTube videos, and like it's interesting to read through their strategies and see like, oh, this is what this kind of platform does try to incentivize, right? Which is conflict, trying to chase after the algorithm. So whatever's like the hot thing of the day, making sure that you're getting, videos out on time, even if they're just sort of vaguely connected to it. Right. And it's like, too, like, and I like that what you're saying about like it not necessarily being dominated, but the fact is when people are going on here and searching for political topics in general, they're not first typically landing on like this channel or Jacobin or anything like that. They're usually, at worst, like a Jordan Peterson kind of situation,
PragerU,
or PragerU,
Right.
and then not ideal either, some kind of like Pod Save America, like zombie clone kind of thing, right? So it is difficult to try to find a way to build, to sort of wade through that and to sort of do the kind of political education that's needed, while also, existing in an area where they're trying to, make you do something completely different.
Right.
I mean, like, just as well as I do, like, for example, like thumbnails, like you have to like make, these like insane, like shock faces to get, clicks or things like that. If you do anything on like I think, I love doing videos on Bill Gates, because I think it's good to, come after billionaires by name. But it is also interesting because you get a whole different, traffic source, and you can see it from the comments that we get. A lot of them are like people like, well, wow, this is interesting. You could see that maybe some things are percolating, and then also just like crazy town like conspiracy theories about like, how did you not talk about the fact that like he's behind 5G and all this kind of stuff. It's like, you don't need conspiracy. We literally just told you why he's a bad guy and he controls a lot of things. But I don't know, you realize how like those systems work as well.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple thoughts to that. On the one hand, like you're saying, I mean, it's one thing to say, we see a mirage in front of us and we can intellectually say, well, we know what this is. It's not a real thing. It's an optical illusion going on in front of us. But the fact that you know how something works doesn't mean that you don't see the appearance still.
Mm-hmm.
And so we still, as people making content on the left, still have to abide by the general rules of how to make content. And so,
Mm-hmm.
like you're saying, with like something like thumbnails or, we try not to do clickbait, but every once in a while we had some clickbaity like titles, and
Mm-hmm.
Even just the way you keep on a weekly schedule, like
right.
that sort of thing it really controls your time. And that's because if you don't, you'll fall off. Unless you're one of these massive YouTubes, you basically need to keep regular output. And Twitch, I hear, is the same way. If you're not on there, 8 hours a week, you're like not even on there basically.
Right. Yeah. And then going back to the other thing of, conspiracy theories, again, people are going to believe things that meet their reality. That I think whenever you, that was just too much to handle. It was like a spit take. But
I can't see my glass in front of me because of my microphone. See, all these perceptions are leaving.
That's right. Everything's an illusion, folks. No, but I think like to be on the left, your starting point, your starting premise when you look out at, your fellow human beings in society is to say that, most of these people, the vast majority of these people are good people. They want good outcomes. They have people that they care about and love, and there's people who care about and love them. again, maybe not every single person, but the vast majority of people are fairly rational. They're not like ultra maximalist rational that you sometimes get on like the right wing version of this, but people are rational. Like most people are not going to say, I'm just going to go sleep outside tonight instead of in my home. Like I'm going to, there's a good sense of like, I have to do those things that keep me surviving day to day, week to week, month to month. And they do, given good options, I think most people would in fact pick good outcomes for themselves and others. And I think you have to have some sense or some basis, or that should be your basis to understand humanity and society if you're a socialist, because you want to build a society that's based on people working together, finding commonalities, building upon common interests. I really do think that most people are in fact good people. And then from that you then have to explain, well, why do they go to a conspiracy theory? Why do they go to the right? Why do they, when they're in the Bessemer unionization drive, why do they vote against the union? And it's so easy to say in any of these situations, oh, they're stupid. They want to hurt others. They want a bad outcome. They don't know what's in their best interest. And I think you have to immediately reject that. In some cases, in some particular cases, maybe that's true, but I think a lot of that's pathological, and pathologies are by definition not the norm. I think for most people, they try to do their best to navigate the world with the available information they have, and a lot of information is bullshit or misinformation. And that's again part of why we do political education. But I think the left, if it's to progress in this moment, has to deal with real people and their real material interests and their real ideologies that they understand the world through. And so we see it incumbent on us to make the case to them that actually we're not crazy people, that we have sensible political solutions to both the particular situations they're in and in a much like grander scale. Like we have a vision of where we're going as a society. And again, that's on us, like to make the case to others. Absolutely. And so when people don't agree with us, we should maybe not in every case, but more often than not, understand it as a failing on our part to not be reaching people where they're at and finding a way to actually talk to people. And so I guess my last thought on this is just, I think the left should try to do its best to avoid all the culture war stuff. Like, some stuff is truly unavoidable but for the most part, I think a lot of it, you try to be agnostic on it and say, listen, that's fine, but I have a much bigger and more important political issue right now that I think you would also care about. And you listen to them, but you make your case for, let's not focus on this kind of, it's some, do you have the right consumer choice or not? Are you buying the right thing or not? Like it's, are you getting what you deserve in your job? Do you have the healthcare that you need based on your medical conditions?
Well, we're going to be playing in a little bit this conversation we had with the folks at Reclaim Idaho. But that's exactly what they did there. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, Cale, but they got Medicaid expansion because one, they refused to hire a bunch of political consultants, was like the first big choice. And then they said, we're just going to drive around the state. And, Idaho, I mean, is a well, I mean, it's a lot of space to drive across, but like, it's not Texas or California. It's also like less people that you have to speak to. But what they were able to do was, okay, we'll talk to these people about why expanding Medicaid is beneficial to you. People think, oh, that's a good idea. Then they would say, hey, would you like to talk to folks? And they were able to not only, reach a lot of people through this strategy, just like the main organizers, but get a lot of other people involved. who were knocking on doors in their own communities. And then they got more and more. I mean, it's like the perfect kind of grassroots campaign in that sense. And that was so much more effective than any kind of like good ad. It's so much more deeply rooted in the community. And it's a great baseline, I think, for doing political organizing in any space. And that's one thing that the DSA, not to be like super I mean, for people who haven't worked on political campaigns, that's one thing that the DSA is like very skilled at, especially early on, was like just having this like great army of like door knockers that would be an asset to any campaign, instead of just having to hire people for $10 an hour or whatever the hell they typically pay canvassers or not. But like thinking about politics on that level, because what they were able to do there too is like, this is a Republican state, and they just talked to people and they met them at their level without having this kind of preconceived notion of which way the conversation was going to go. And a lot more people were convinced than if they were just doing, okay, we're just going to talk to people who identify as Democrat on our van system.
Right. I mean, that's the the lasting beauty of the Twin Sanders campaigns, that on the one hand, we now, it's not a ever permanent thing, but we know that our political platform of expanding public goods, of decommodifying things that should be human rights in this country and around the world, and having greater say, greater control over your life in the workplace and beyond, is overwhelmingly popular. And Sanders was able to demonstrate that. And it also got all of us, and a lot of us, it was the first time being politically engaged, but it got us to go knock on doors and talk to real people and get a sense of those who live near us, those who don't live near us, to understand like where people actually are. And it's pretty different from what you see in the media. Like that's just the top 20% of this country just arguing with itself, and the vast majority of people are somewhere very different.
Yeah, the culture war point just makes me cringe thinking back to Kamala Harris making a campaign issue out of banning Trump's Twitter account, and it's just like, to anybody who doesn't follow this stuff closely, that's just insane. Especially like you got 1 or 15% chance that people are going to be paying attention to you, and that's the foot forward you're going to be putting in.
Isn't it remarkable she's the vice president? Like I just saw her face on a magazine. It was like, oh yeah, that's right. This person that no one voted for because no one really liked her ended up vice president.
Yeah.
It might be more than that by the end of it. I don't know. I don't know. Good luck, Joe, but I'm worried about Joe. That's all I'm saying.
No, but it's funny. I mean, you even saw like, not to be too online, but like Chelsea Clinton was going on recently about, oh, Donald Trump needs to post pictures of him taking the vaccine. And it's just like, who is this for? Honestly, I'll tell you, there's a lot of people who are really struggling right now without having Trump as like a figure in media to just fixate on all the time. Cause that's all, mainstream media was doing for 4 years.
But there's a lot of people losing a lot of money right now. Like CNN, just their profits dipped hard after Trump left, because that's all they gave a shit about.
I was hanging out with some older family members, and I didn't say anything, but they were saying like, yeah, I'm not watching the news anymore. I just feel so relieved. I don't have to watch TV every night to see what Donald Trump did wrong. Oh, and I didn't feel like getting in the middle of that. But I was just like, this is, I'm sure, something that's happening all around the country, that all these people were just tuning out, who are watching this stuff religiously and just getting, it was like the image of it, watching. I don't know if you ever, spent time with anybody in your family or
with your family.
Who just would just sit and watch for, hours, just like, getting really worked up about every move. And like, and don't, people who are listening to this, don't misunderstand this. Not that you shouldn't have been outraged at a lot of the stuff that Donald Trump did, but it was just like a drip feed constantly.
Yeah.
And it had very little to do with politics. Oftentimes it's like, oh, Donald Trump mispronounced this, or like, he failed to do this, important tradition of the White House. And,
he called Steve Jobs or Tim Cook, Tim Apple.
Which, like, that stuff is
cool.
funny. Like, you should be watching that because it's hilarious.
I miss him, actually.
Right, but it's like, but very often, yeah, I mean, there's like real serious problems, obviously, with the Trump, or there was were we just still in the Trump administration? I mean, there were major problems with the Trump administration that like the only available like responses, public responses to those were from liberals who, again, everything then becomes about, you know, at the individual level, like, are you a good or a bad person? Do you agree with the president or do you not agree with the president? Are you going to buy the thing that supports the president or not? Like, it's not politics. None of that was politics.
Wait, so I should return my David Hogg pillow? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, if it's a good pillow, keep it.
No, I
but and we all got to buy pillows.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that Matt Karp's piece on like Gilded Age politics was really good on this. He's like, you know, like politics are something that's felt very viscerally by people. They're very passionate about it, but like the actual scope of debate is probably smaller, you know, than it's been in a really long time for folks who really follow this. Kale, we'll definitely have to do this again sometime soon. Maybe get you on a post game and just sort of mess around, watch some clips. Because I like to be able to show Kale things, online things, since he's not really catching all of it. Like, there's a lot of memes we could fill Kale in on.
Yeah, that's funny, because that reminds me of my friend who doesn't have any social media, and like half of whenever I would meet up with him, it's just like, apparently this happened, and showing him an online thing.
I know what's going on. I have shooters. I got people who are looking out for me. I just don't have to. I don't scroll. That's the difference. So you guys should just get the right WhatsApp chats, and you'll be good.
Interesting, yeah.
I like to have my hand in the river looking for gold, man. You never know what you're gonna find. But anyways, folks, if you haven't already, check out Jacobin Magazine's YouTube channel. You can see Kale's work both front and center and also behind the scenes there on weekends on the Jacobin Show and all of the quick takes and other videos that they do there. I really appreciate having you on, brother.
Yeah, my pleasure as always. Good seeing you both.
Yeah, good seeing you again.
Take care.
See you.
Talk to you soon.